Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
If you'd like to go ahead and get your Bibles, we're going to be in the book of Job, and it will really help you to be able to follow along and read from the scripture yourself this morning. While we've got some 20-odd chapters to cover, we're really not going to focus on every single one of them, but try to wrap up the book in good fashion. I'm sorry for you if you are jumping in right now with us. It's going to be rather hard to relate to some of the things that are said, but maybe at best we'll just prick your curiosity and you'll go home and read the book for yourself and try to figure out what God is saying to us in this book. Joey and Scott have already helped us get ready for the content of the book of Job. I want to remind you about its setting. We're not told what period of history it is. We don't know when Job lived. Internal evidence kind of suggests it predates Moses because of Job being a sacrificing father, because there's no quotations of Scripture, and Job lived a very long life. So it looks like he is in that period of the patriarchs. The structure of the book is that there's a little bit of narrative in the beginning and the end, but in the middle, a whole lot of poetry. Now that might surprise you, and you might say, I didn't remember reading any poetry. That's because Hebrew poetry is different. It doesn't use rhyming words like we use in our poetry. What it uses is rhyming thought, called parallelism. It will say the same thing over and over and over and over again, not because that's necessarily how those guys talked. Remember, this is somebody writing this later, writing about this real event in a very poetic fashion. So Hebrew poetry uses parallelism. It uses real rich figures and deep emotion to convey thoughts. So now the reason for that is so that when we're studying a topic like why does suffering exist, God wants us not only to think about it here, but to feel it here. So that's why it's written in a poetic form for us. It doesn't mean it wasn't real, just because it's poetry. It just means that it was selected to be represented and discussed in poetic form. Everybody good with that? So go back and read it again, and you'll see sometimes, well, you say, those guys said the same thing a lot of times. Well, that's what their poetry does. It wears us out with this repetition. The purpose of the book, it's debatable, I guess. You could say that Ezekiel used Job to say that he was a very righteous man. He mentions him twice in chapter 14. James uses him as an example of steadfastness or perseverance, or as our English word sometimes suggests, patience. James chapter 5. You will notice when you read the book that it's about a whole lot of suffering. Everybody, even at a cursory level reading, you get that there was a whole lot of suffering going on. Second thing you're going to get is they sure did talk about this suffering a lot, right? Over and over. Chapter after chapter, they go through it. They go through it again. They talk about it. They go back through the same speeches. So there is a lot of suffering and a lot of talk about suffering. So that is the essence of the book. Except there is this one really unique feature. This isn't just general suffering. This isn't any old person that is suffering because they've done wrong. This is a really righteous man suffering. In fact, chapter 1, verse 8 says he's how righteous? He's the best one on the earth. God couldn't find a better person than Job. Of all the people trying to seek God, please God, do right, Job did better than all of them. And yet he was singled out to lose all of his children, all of his wealth, lose his standing, his prestige, his honor in his community, and to be afflicted with terrible physical pain. So now the question is, why does that happen? And that's what the book of Job is going to take up and discuss for us. Spoiler alert for you, it's not going to answer your question as to why righteous people suffer. Not directly. It's not going to answer and give us one verse that says, there it is, that explains everything. In fact, when we read the introduction to the story that God has this conversation with Satan, we think that when God shows up in chapter 38 to talk to Job, we think what? All right, he's going to tell him. He's going to say, look, Job, all of this happened to you because Satan challenged me and I had to prove that you really are legit. That you don't just serve me because I bless you. You don't just serve me because I put a hedge around you. You serve me because I'm God and you're not. But he doesn't tell him that, does he? That's what we want. We want that explanation. But let me ask you this. If he gave you that explanation, what would it do in your heart and mind? My first response would be another question. If it was Satan doing it, God, why didn't you tell him no? Why'd you say yes? Right? Would you say that? Or would you say, oh, that's it. That's good. That answers all my questions. I don't have any problems with losing all my children because you told me I was some sort of pawn in this heavenly chess game. My question would be, God, why does he even exist? Where did he come from? Why do you allow him to do things like this? So even if God had tried to answer Job's question, all it would have done would just be create question after question after question. We'd want to know about the presence of evil. Where did it come from? Why does it exist? How long is it going to be here? How do you run your universe? Why do you allow him to afflict us? It would have just raised thousands of other questions. So what the book does in its structure and in its purpose is it addresses the question, tries to address it from a human standpoint. So those guys that Sean talked to us last week, Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar, they give their perspective on it. Their perspective in answering Job, why Job's going through all this was what? Real simple. You reap what you sow. Real simple philosophy for life. If you live your life and you do good, if you're wise and do right things, God's going to do what? He's going to bless you. If you're stupid and you do evil, wicked things, what's going to happen? You're going to get cursed. Your life's going to be miserable. So Job's in the middle of misery, so what do you have to conclude from that? Job did something wrong. That's their simple philosophy of life. You reap what you sow. It's transactional. God will bless you if you do right. He will punish you if you do wrong. So that's the first human perspective given on suffering. Now, is there an element of truth to that? Come on, you guys can answer that. Yes, there's an element of truth to that. You do wrong things, sometimes there is an immediate punishment given out by agencies that God uses, whether that's your parents or it's the law of the land, or if he's going to do something directly. Sometimes there is a direct consequence to what we do. But it's just a part of the story. It's not all the story, because does that fit with Job? Is Job suffering because he's done something wrong? No, he's not. Next guy that's going to enter the scene is going to be a guy named by the name of Elihu. We'll talk about him in a minute. He has a more complex view of all this, a more Christian view of it, but even his will fall short. But what I want you to notice is that every human explanation falls short in answering, why do righteous people suffer? Why, when you're trying to do right, do things fall apart? Why do people hurt you when you're trying to love them? Why do people die? Why did your child die? Why did that person commit suicide? Whatever it is, why does all this happen? And every human explanation is going to fall short of that. But I want you to get prepared for something. Don't think that God is going to answer every question we have about that. He's not going to do that. He's going to do something different. He's going to call us rather to trust him. And he's going to give us every reason to trust him when we go through things like this. So I don't want to make light of anybody's suffering, anybody's torment, anybody's anguish, because everybody will go through it at some point in their life. Okay? So what I want to do this morning is I want to take a little bit of time, talk about Elihu, and mostly, though, focus in on God showing up and giving his answer. Okay? So let's look at Elihu. He comes on the scene in chapter 32. He's a young man. He's been listening to the conversations between Job and his three friends. He's been there the whole time, seems like. And he's been listening. And he has concluded a couple of things. He's concluded, one, none of you guys have given Job a good answer. That's number one. Secondly, he concludes, Job, and you have justified yourself at the expense of God's righteousness and holiness. You've condemned God to make yourself look better. And so what Elihu is going to do in 32 through 37, he's going to first of all defend God. He's going to defend God's wisdom. He's going to defend God's honor. He's going to defend God's righteousness and justice. He's going to defend God's goodness. Along the way, in defending God, he also is going to rebuke Job over and over again. If you'd like an example of this, look at chapter 33, verse 8. This is the summary of what Elihu believes he's heard Job say. Chapter 33, verse 8. Surely you have spoken in my hearing, and I've heard the sound of your words. So listen, now he's quoting Job in essence. I'm pure, without transgression. I'm innocent, and there is no guilt in me. Behold, he, Job speaking of God, invents pretexts against me. He counts me as his enemy. He puts my feet in stocks. He watches all my paths. Behold, let me tell you, Elihu says, you are not right in this, for God is greater than man. Elihu has heard Job say what? I'm innocent and God has done what? Hurt me unfairly. Everybody with me? If you guys don't get this, it's going to be really boring. I'll just give you that heads up. Because we can't make any sense out of what God says at the end if we don't know what Job's been saying the whole time. You got to get, Job isn't asking the question, is God powerful? So if all we get out of God's speech is that God's really powerful, that's not what Job needed to hear. He knew that. What Job's struggling with is that with all of this power, unlimited power, why do these things happen? Are you with me now? That's what he wants to know. Because it looks to me to be unfair. It doesn't make any sense. It seems to be unjust from one that has all power. So Elihu says, Job, what you've done is you've said you're innocent. God has been cruel to you, and he has made you his target. So, as I've said, he will defend God throughout. Here's one of his defenses, chapter 34, verse 10. Elihu says, therefore listen to me, you men of understanding. Far be it from God to do wickedness, and from the Almighty to do wrong. That Elihu knows. I cannot necessarily explain to you, Job, why all this has happened, but I can tell you one thing. We don't get to judge God. And God will always do right. For he pays a man according to his work and makes him find it according to his way. Surely God will not act wickedly, and the Almighty will not pervert justice. So he has heard what Job has said. He defends God, rebukes Job, and then he's going to offer his perspective, chapter 33. And his perspective is going to be more of a Christian perspective. We look at suffering sometimes. What does James say about counting all trials all joy, right? Why? Because what does it do? Works for our good. Teaches us. It produces perseverance and character, hope, all these good things. God uses it to do good things for us. That's the Christian perspective, right? That it's not punishment when you go through bad things. It's God trying to correct us. God trying to warn us. God trying to turn us from our ways and spare us trouble. More of a chastening, more of a discipline, more of a correction rather than punishment. So listen now what Elihu says in chapter 33, verse 14. He says, indeed, God speaks once or twice, yet no one notices it. How does God speak? Elihu says, in a dream, a vision of the night, when sound sleep falls on men while they slumber in their beds. Then he opens the ears of men and seals their instruction. So he's teaching them, revealing things to them in dreams and visions. Then he opens the ears of men and seals their instruction. Verse 17, that he may turn aside from his conduct. Why does God do that? To turn him. Keep him from his pride so that we don't get puffed up and arrogant. To keep back his soul from the pit, to keep us from harm and destruction, and his life from passing over into Sheol. Now, notice, here's the transition. We get that. We say, okay, God speaks to us through his word, at that time through visions and dreams. But Elihu throws something else in with God's ability to teach us. Verse 19, man is also chastened with pain on his bed. So Elihu says what? This pain is really a chastening. God's teaching you something. Just like he would say in his word instruction to keep you from pride and doing evil things and hurtful things, so he also uses pain, Elihu says. And verse 19, and unceasing complaint in his bones. His conclusion, verse 29, is, behold, God does all these oftentimes with men. He said God does it a lot. It's standard procedure with God. To bring back his soul from the pit, that he may enlighten with the light of life. So Elihu's explanation is pretty simple. Job, you may not be suffering for anything you've done, punishment, but God is trying to correct you. He's trying to chasten you, discipline you, keep you from pride, keep you from hurtful things that you would do, and keep your soul from the pit. Now, while Elihu's explanation is more palatable, we feel a little better about that, don't we? So that's a good thing. God trying to keep us from danger. Does it really fit with Job's situation? Did Job need to grow up? Was that what God was doing, trying to mature him? He's described as probably the best guy living. Doesn't look like he needs any training, any opportunity to grow further. Is it that he's puffed up with pride, Job? Well, no, there's some pride that comes out in these speeches, but that's pain talking. That's misery being expressed openly and honestly to God, more so than a guy that thinks he's better than God. That's his pain and his emotion speaking in all of that. So even Elihu, while much more palatable, his explanation falls short. So what we've got to do is now we've got to get ready to listen to God. So before we do, I'm going to real quickly take us back through what Job has said about God. Okay, just so that you can be really set up well for listening to God's response. First of all, notice that by the time we get to the end of chapter 31, Job has reached the breaking point. He cannot take any more. He is so miserable. He's in such pain and agony from the physical torment, from the emotional trauma and mental trauma that all of this causes. He cannot take another day. And so when we get to the end of chapter 31, we listen to Job's words. At verse 35 of chapter 31. Oh, that I had one to hear me. Behold, here is my signature, Job says. Let the Almighty answer me, and the indictment which my adversary has written. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder. I would bind it to myself like a crown. I would declare to him the number of my steps. Like a prince, I would approach him. And then down at the end of verse 40, it says, the words of Job are ended. So now it's transition time. Now we're going to hear from other people. Elihu first, and then from God. So what kind of things has Job said in particular about God? Chapter 9 is a place you can look at with me. Chapter 9, verse 22. Listen to what, you got to really process what Job is saying about God here. He says, it is all one. Therefore I say, he, that's God, destroys the guiltless and the wicked. Everybody hear that? Job's saying, God, you treat the innocent and the guilty just the same. Y'all don't like that. I know that. I know we don't like it, but does everybody admit that's what he said? You know, come on, this works better when we just interact a little bit. You can say, yeah, or if you say, well, I don't know what he's saying, it's all right. But he said, you treat the guilty and the not guilty the same. Job charges against God. Going on, the guiltless and the wicked. If the scourge kills suddenly, he mocks the despair of the innocent. Now, he's going in places that we're not comfortable with, but he's saying, God, it looks like you take pleasure in this misery that's been inflicted on me. And then he goes on further to say, verse 24, the earth is given into the hands of the wicked. Everybody got that? Who's running the world, according to Job? Say it. The wicked. They've got it. He covers the face of its judges. If it's not he, then who is it? Job says. Because really, if wickedness prevailing, God's let it happen. If it's not him, who is it? He's miserable. He's confused. He's perplexed. He's dumbfounded with all of this. And so that's what Job says, is that you treat the guilty and the innocent alike. In fact, you've just basically turned over the world to the wicked. They've got control of it. You're just hands off. You're neglecting everything. You're not seeing what's going on. That's what Job charges God with. Chapter 27 of the book, verses 1 and 2. Job says, as he continues his discourse, as God lives, who has taken away my right, and the Almighty who has embittered my soul. Job says he's bitter, but he says God has caused it. And I had a right. I had things I deserved, but God has taken it away from me. Instead of giving me what is my right, what is due me, He sent all of this misery into my life. Chapter 30, verses 20 and 21. This may be the worst expression of all in terms of how he feels. He says, I cry out to you for help, but you do not answer me. At the time and point when Job needs God most, he says what? You're not there. You don't hear me. You don't answer me. In fact, he goes further. I stand up and you turn your attention against me. You've become cruel to me. While with the might of your hand, you persecute me. That's how Job feels. So I wanted you guys to get that in your ears so that now when God gets ready to show up, what's he going to answer? He's going to answer all this stuff that Job has said. He's going to answer questions about, is God unjust? Is he unfair? Has he taken his hands off of the wheel and just let the world go into chaos? Is he not attentive? Does he not see what's going on with Job? Is he distant? Is he uncaring? Job's question is not about whether or not God is powerful. He wants to know, God, are you just? Are you fair? He wants to know, do you care? Are you there? Are you still running things? And are you still in control? So this will be real interesting when God shows up, because those are the things that Job has questioned. Now, as I said earlier, we've got to give Job some degree of grace and mercy here, because he's speaking out of agony that most of us never experience, right? This is pain talking. This is deep emotion. This is torment. He feels terrorized. He feels helpless. He feels abandoned, confused, and he's in anguish. And he's pouring all of this out to God. All right. If I've lost you up to this point, come back, please. You really do want to hear now what God has to say. Okay? Because now this is the focus of the book. Even though it's the fewest chapters, it's the focus. God shows up and God is going to speak. And if I could just in a feeble way kind of break down what God's going to say, he's going to do a couple of things. He's going to take Job on this cosmic, universal world tour. And I really do hope that he actually picked Job up and took him around. That would be awesome, wouldn't it? I mean, if he had been able to take him back to creation and see it. At the Creation Museum up in northern Kentucky, they have a presentation video that tries to show you and you can't even come close to what it looked like. But it is just explosions, and I hope Job got to see that. I hope he carried him and showed him where the snow gets stored up when God's not using it. I hope he really did get to see a boundary that God said, I drew this boundary and told the oceans they can come this far, but you cannot go any further. There's nothing in that book that suggests he got to go on a tour. I admit that. Except when God showed up, he didn't just show up with words. He showed up how? In a whirlwind, in a storm. So in addition to Job hearing things, Job's getting to feel and experience some stuff too. All right, so he's going to take Job on this tour. Second thing he's going to do is he's going to make Job an offer. And that is, would you like to run the world for a day? That's a good one. I'll be honest with you, I've missed this in times past. That was the benefit of a guy named Tim Mackey who writes for the Bible Project. Deep insight, man, he's good. And he made this observation and really helped me with that. So full credit. Third thing God's going to do is he talks about these animals, these couple of animals, Behemoth and Leviathan. Everybody familiar with that end of the book? And your Bibles might even call them hippopotamus and crocodile. That could be the point. It could be that God says, I want to take the two most terrible creatures you guys know about, and I'm going to use them as an example. But it looks like there's more to it than just God saying, hey, look at the hippopotamus and be impressed with him. Or look at the crocodile and beware. You'll fight him, but you'll only fight him once, kind of thing. There's more to it. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But let's go first of all on this first cosmic tour that God takes Job on. Chapter 38. Scott already has covered some of these things. When verse 4, when God shows up and he asks Job, where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? The obvious question, the answer to all of these questions is, if God says, do you know the answer? The answer is no, I don't know. Where were you? I wasn't there. Are you old enough to have experienced it? I'm not old enough. Can you explain it? I can't explain it. Can you do it? I can't do it. Over and over again, showing Job his limitations and showing how unlimited God is. God laid the foundations of the earth. God holds it in place. Even though you and I can say we can see it now in our day, people can venture out and take a look back at it, we still don't know what's holding it up. What's making it not spin out of control and go pummeling through the universe? Job, do you understand it? Do you know what holds it in place? Do you know what it's founded on? Were you there when I did that? Was not there. Don't understand it. He'll talk about the oceans. He'll talk about commanding the morning, verse 12. Have you ever got up and said, all right, it's time for the sun to rise, or it's time to go down? No, you've never done that. Do you know where the springs of the sea are? Where's water come from? Where did it all originate? Do you know where light dwells? Not just that you can say the sun's out there and I see it. Do you know the ultimate origin of light? Verse 21 seems to be a jab at Job. He says, you know, for you were born then, and the numbers of your days are great. It's like he's saying, you should know. You made big claims, but God knows Job was not there. What about the storehouses of snow and hail, the channel for the flood and the rain? He takes him on a broader tour. What about the constellations, the Pleiades and the Orion or the Bear? Can you contain them? Can you chain them? Do you control them? There's lightnings and there's clouds. All of these things. Now here's my question. After God has asked Job all of that, what's his point? What's his point in all of that? Remember, Job has charged God with being what? You've turned the world over to the wicked. You're not involved enough. You're not watching closely enough. You're not paying enough attention. And because of that, all of this evil has broken out, and we're all paying the price for it. And so what has God just told Job? Job, I know every single detail of every single thing that happens, not just in this world, but all over the universe. Everybody hear it? Now you gotta get impressed with some of this, because Job, all throughout the discussions with his friends, Job always had an answer, didn't he? He always had a rebuttal. He always had an objection. Anything they said, Job wasn't satisfied. When God gets done speaking, what does Job do? He said, I'm going to put my hand over my mouth. I'm going to shut up. So something happens. He gets told something that really answers what he needed to hear. Because he was thinking, God, you've just let go. You've been neglectful. But God assures him that he knows every detail of everything, things that you and I don't even think about on a regular basis. We don't worry about what holds the earth up. We don't worry about if the sun will rise or set. We don't worry about whether the rain will end or when it's going to come. Right? All those things that we don't worry about. Thousands of things. God says, I'm attentive to every single detail. All right, next tour begins there at the end of chapter 38, but it's a tour through the animal kingdom. And on this tour of the animal kingdom, God's going to show Job lions and ravens, mountain goats, deer, wild donkeys, ostriches, a horse that looks more like a horse of war, a hawk, and an eagle. What he's going to show him. And he wants to know things from Job. Like for the lion, can you feed the lion? Anybody want to take that job on? Feeding the lions. All right, let me ask you a little deeper question. Do you even like the way God feeds lions? How many of you have to turn your head when you're watching a nature show and that lion pounces on a little deer? Like, oh, that seems so unfair, right? Do you really like the way God feeds the deer? I mean, the lions? Or it gets that old guy, that wildebeest hanging at the end of the creek, can't get across the river. He's dinner tonight. We're like, and he says, would you like to take care of that? Feeding all these animals? Does it seem unjust to you, unfair, harsh? What God does? Job can't feed the lions. You and I might feed one or two, but hundreds of thousands on a daily basis. That's God's work. God does that. What if it's not lions? What about crows? God feeds the crows, feeds the ravens. What about the mountain goats? I don't know exactly what the point is in that one, except it seems like he's picked a really obscure thing to talk about. Because I'm asking myself the question, I don't even know if I've ever seen a mountain goat. Any of you guys? We got any mountain goats in Alabama? No. So it looks like he's picking a real obscure thing. And not only just an obscure thing, but he wants to know a really obscure thing about this mountain lion. Wild donkeys. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. The mountain goats, verse 1, and the deer. He wants to know, do you know when they give birth? Are you aware of every time they calve or have a newborn? God knows that. The wild donkeys, verse 5, he wants to know, do you understand their grazing habits? Why they pick certain fields? Down at verse 13, he asks him about the ostrich. And the ostrich is basically really a pretty silly creature, God says. This is by God's. He says it lays its eggs, but what does it do? Covers them up with dust and then does what? Leaves. And then, well, it's there in the dust, covered up with a little bit of sand. What can happen? It could really easily get crushed. But the ostrich mother doesn't seem to be concerned about it. And in fact, then when they hatch out, the ostrich mother really is kind of neglectful. Like, you guys are on your own. I'm not taking care of you. And he wants to ask Job, do you understand that? Why that animal acts that way? Job would have to say what? I can't tell you a single thing about why an ostrich does what it does. There's this mighty horse of war. Can you explain why certain horses, when they go into battle, they don't get afraid, they get excited for the battle that's about to happen? Can you explain it? What about hawks and eagles? Anybody want to try to have a conversation with God about aerodynamics, thermal currents, the laws of physics that make flight possible? Anybody want to talk to God about that? No. But God knows it, doesn't he? He knows all of it. What's the point of all of that? The point is that Job doesn't know as much about his world as he thought he should know, or that he thinks he knows. God knows it all, and God's in control of all of it. So the first answer of God, when he takes him on this tour and says, look, I'm still in charge, it takes away one possible explanation for Job's suffering. I'm suffering because God's neglectful. I'm suffering because God's not aware. I'm suffering because God is removed and distant. God says to Job, that's not the answer. I'm very attentive. I'm very involved. I know everything that happens. I'm in control of it all. His second answer to Job concerning, do you know what's going on? God says, I know everything. I see everything. Nothing misses my observation, attention, and awareness. All right, so Job's response to God's answers. Chapter 40, verse 3. Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am insignificant. So he has seen that throughout this discourse of God. Behold, I'm insignificant. What can I reply to you? I lay my hand on my mouth. Once I've spoken, and I will not answer even twice, and I will add nothing more. Job says, in essence, I'm really insignificant, and I'm going to shut up at this point. I'm not going to say anything else. All right, next thing that God does with Job, verses 6 through 14. Really think about this with me for just a minute. God speaks again to Job out of the storm, tells him to gird up his loins, talk to me like a man. Verse 8, will you really annul my judgment? Will you condemn me that you may be justified? Do you have an arm like God? So he's asking, do you have power like God? And can you thunder with a voice like his? So then he offers Job this opportunity. Adorn yourself with eminence and dignity. Clothe yourself with honor and majesty. So he's now saying, here you go. Get your power. Get everything together. Adorn yourself. Dress yourself. Position yourself in the seat of all power. And then verse 11. Pour out the overflowings of your anger. And look on everyone who is proud and make him low. Look on everyone who is proud and humble him. Tread down the wicked where they stand. Hide them in the dust together. Bind them in the hidden place. Then I will also confess to you that your right hand can save you. It seems like he's offering him this chance. You want to run it? Run it. Does anybody want to take that offer? Would you like to feed all of the animal kingdom for one day? Every single one of them. Would you like to make every single decision? Would you like to run everything that needs to be run and woven together so that life exists peacefully? Anybody want to take him up? And more than that, he says, run it according to your standard of justice. Job's standard of justice is you do wrong, you get what? You get wrath. Do you really want to do that, Job? Do you want to crush the wicked right where they stand? If he did, if God ran the world that way, we'd all be dying off like flies, right? We'd be dropping all over the place. And would anybody have a chance to grow if that was the system God used? Would anybody have a chance to change? Would anybody ever mature? Would anybody ever get better if immediately when you do something wrong, you get struck down? That's what Job thought should happen. And God said, do you really want to run the world according to your system of justice and fairness? Well, Job does not take God up on that offer either. And then we go into the description of the animals. Behemoth, chapter 40, and Leviathan. I'm not going to be insistent at all in how you choose to view these things. I will tell you this. He's got more than just a physical creature in mind, because If you've ever wondered where fire-breathing dragons came right from right here. Look at chapter 41, verse 18. This Leviathan that God speaks about says that when he sneezes, when this creature sneezes, it flashes forth light. That's pretty. Try to get that image in your head. I really am I can't get past, which Disney movie is it, Laura, that has the dragon at the castle? They all probably have, it's breathing out fire and you're trying to get past it. That's the image I've got in my head. He sneezes and light goes forth. His eyes are like the eyelids of morning. Verse 19, out of his mouth go burning torches. Sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils smoke goes forth, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame goes forth from his mouth. So I don't really think he's just wanting us to focus on one literal creature, but these big creatures that are huge, gigantic, terrifying, armor-clad, that nobody can control. You can't put enough spears into it to kill it. You can't put enough hooks in it to catch it. And there they are. They're part of God's creation. And in fact, he not only says they're part of his creation, I made them. And as you read through these chapters, it sounds kind of like God's proud of them. It's not like he's apologizing for them. I'm sorry about these guys there. No, he's saying, of Behemoth, he said he's the first of God's creation. Well, whoa, that sounds almost like a pretty important spot to me. You all can figure it out yourself, but I'm just saying, does not it look at all like God's apologizing for their presence? But he's saying, here they are. And you got to know that they are gigantic and they're terrible and they are powerful and dangerous. And if you ever encounter them, you're going to come away hurt. They're going to bring pain. They're going to bring suffering. They're going to bring agony into your life. Everybody with me? So now what has he told Job? God's world is good. When he created everything, what did he say after it? It was good. But God is telling us that even still part of his creation today, there's a lot of dangerous things. And all these things that are good, still a lot of danger. Just check Behemoth and Leviathan if you doubt it. Out of all these things that are beautiful in God's world, his creation, there's also things that will kill you if you get too close to them, right? What was the existence of the world before God began creation? It says there was darkness. It was chaos. God didn't eliminate all the chaos. He just carved out a little niche, a little place for all of us to exist, where there can be some order, some semblance of peace and sustainability, but we're still surrounded by chaos. Even when God gives us a glimpse into the spiritual world, what does he show us there? We see wars and we see beings and powers that are fighting with each other. We're surrounded by chaos and danger and things that will take your life. So sometimes the explanation for your suffering isn't that you've done something to deserve it. It's not that God's even trying to teach you something. It's just simply what? We've bumped up against the chaos. We still live in a world where at present God has not designed it to keep us from suffering. Now, I know you don't like that answer. I'm not even crazy about that answer. But that's it. God says it's still there. Those creatures are there, those beings there. Again, I don't really think he's just saying, Tim, be impressed with a hippopotamus at a zoo. Well, we got to where we can control them. We can get them up and gather them. Or crocodiles. We even have shows that show people killing them, right? But what they represent, that danger, that uncontrollable, chaotic part of life. You and I still suffer from natural disasters. We can't control them. We still suffer from violence that other people do. We suffer from wars. We suffer from diseases. Things happen. It's not. So when your friend loses their baby, don't go to them and say, you've done something to deserve it. That would be nonsense. Don't even say to them, God, I know God's trying to teach you something in this. Rather tell them what? Look, this is an evil, fallen world that we live in. There's a lot of danger and a lot of hurt and a lot of suffering, and we've just bumped up against it. Everybody with me? I can't explain it to you. I'm not going to try to explain it to you. I'm not going to try to put it in some safe place for you to process it. I'm just going to have to say God still orders it, that we still hurt a lot in this world. Now, I may have missed it completely, so you guys just do with it. Oh, wow. And I'm going way too long trying to tell you about stuff that you may not be all that interested in. All right, so Job's last response, chapter 42, verse 1. Job answers the Lord and says, I know that you can do all things. He did get that much out of his discourse. You can do everything, God. I know that. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You've got purpose to what you do. I'm sorry that I said you were neglectful. I'm sorry I accused you of turning it over to the wicked. I'm sorry that I charged you with being distant and removed and unattached, because you could do everything and no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is it that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I've declared that which I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I do not know. Hear now, and I will speak. I will ask you, and you instruct me. I've heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore I retract and I repent in dust and ashes. Job says, I get it. You are in control. You can do everything and anything you please to do. You've got purpose behind it all. You sustain everything. And I've just gotten way out of my depth and talked about things that I did not understand. Okay, so conclusion to all that. It's a funny ending to the book. God shows up again, talks to the friends and to Job, and says to the friends, what? You guys, you three, all that you said, wrong. Buzz, wrong answer. Job, on the other hand, did what? This surprises me as much as anything in the book, I'll tell you. That God says of Job twice, he spoke right of me. Really? Everything that we heard Job talking about God? You mean when you said he condemned you to justify himself, Job spoke right of me? I don't think that's necessarily the point. I think rather the point is this. Job had a whole lot of complaining to do. But who did he complain to? You can say this. God. Job had a whole lot of misery, a whole lot of crying he did, but who did he cry out to? God. Job didn't understand it. He was completely dumbfounded by it. But who did he ask for help? God. Who did he cry out to? Who did he say, all I want to do is talk to you. Please show up and answer me. God. I personally think that's what he's saying is right. You and I, we're going to go through a whole lot of mess. Stuff that doesn't fall into neat little categories. Things that hurt, and you look at it and you say, I don't deserve this at all. I didn't do anything to bring this on myself. When that happens, that's when God, his interaction with Job begins to make sense to us. And Job wrestled with that before God. All those things he said, God seemed to legitimize it and say, Job's all right to do that. Now, I tell you, not everybody likes that. Right? And I'm kind of even a little bothered by it myself. But you got to do something with God saying of Job, he spoke right of me. And in fact, you guys that did wrong, go to Job, he'll make a sacrifice for you, then I'll accept you. All right, so how are we going to end all of this? Whenever you and I experience suffering, whether it's deserved, undeserved, wherever it comes from, number one, check yourself. If there is something you've done to bring it on yourself, do what? Repent of it. Turn from it. Correct it. It's okay to ask yourself that question. Have I done something that's brought this on myself? I told you guys before about the night I spent in jail when I was a young man. I didn't have to ask anybody about why this happened. I knew why it happened. You drink and you drive, you're going to get arrested. So I brought it on myself. If you can't see what you did to bring it on yourself, ask the question, am I supposed to be learning something here? Is there something I'm supposed to be taught? If that's so, learn it. Learn it. Laura told me years ago when I said to her, I thought she was being sick, and there was something I was supposed to learn from it. She said, well, get busy and learn it. But that's neither here nor there. But if you cannot find an answer for it, accept it, that it's just part of this existence. It's part of the human existence and experience. We're going to interact with a whole lot of evil. A lot of those creatures, Behemoth and Leviathan, they're still there. And a lot of harm's going to come on you. So, know that your torment, your emotional torment, your words, your misery, your cries, it's okay to express them to God. He's big enough to take it. He's not offended by it. He'll hear it. He'll listen to it. He'll endure every cry. Wrestle with it before Him. Seek an answer from Him. And when all of that begins to transpire in your life, you're wrestling with it, know that God's going to ask of you a couple of basic things. Number one is hold on. Just hold on. Hold on. Don't quit. Don't give up. That's what James said about Job. We know about his patience, and patience doesn't fit it, because we think somebody's sitting there just taking it all quietly. The word is steadfastness, perseverance. He just held on. He made it. He made it to the end. God's going to ask you to hold on, and He's going to ask you to trust Him, that He knows what He's doing. The very last thing, James chapter 5, verse 11, this is what the New Testament makes of Job's experience. He said, you've heard about the perseverance of Job, and about the dealings, or the outcome of the dealings of the Lord, that He is full of compassion and He's merciful. That's the outcome. Hold on long enough so that you get to see that. And it may not be here that you get to see it, but you will see it if you hold on. How does Job's story end? He gets all those riches back, twice as much, 10 more children. I don't know if they're his original children or not. That'd be great if it was, but we're not told. His family starts honoring him again. He lives 140 more years. Did Job deserve that? Does it work as a transaction? No. God did that because God is merciful and full of compassion. Period. All right. I don't know if I helped you or hurt you this morning, but probably hurt you. Sit there a long time. Is somebody here this morning that really needs to hear that message, and you need to cry out to God today? Let's do it. We've got time right here. We're going to stop. We're going to sing a song. We're going to invite you to come, and you just pour out your heart to God, whatever you need. If you need to be born again today, wow, this is the time for that. And we'll help you. We'll hear your confession. We'll rejoice with you in that faith that says Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And we'll take you. We'll help you obey God when He says, be baptized, be buried in water. You don't have to understand it. Just trust me. When you do that, I'm going to wash your sins away, and I'm going to bring you up a brand new creature, new life, new heart. Old things gone, new things have come. All you got to do is trust Him on that. Can anybody explain it? Do you know how that happens? That you go into water sinful, you come up clean? I don't understand that. God does. And He says that's what I'll do for you. All right. Scott's got a song picked out. Let's stand together and let's sing this song.